Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about 2 Samuel chapter 21 and verses 1 through 9. So 2 Samuel chapter 21 verses 1 through 9. Then there was a famine in the days of David, 3 years, year after year. And David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered, It is for Saul and for his bloody house, because he slew the Gibeonites. And the king called the Gibeonites and said unto them, Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites, and the children of Israel had sworn unto them, and Saul sought to slay them in his zeal to the children of Israel and Judah. Wherefore David said unto the Gibeonites, Wherefore shall I do for you, and wherewith shall I make the atonement, that ye bless the inheritance of the Lord? And the Gibeonites said unto him, We will have no silver nor gold of Saul, nor of his house, neither for us shalt thou kill any men of Israel. And he said, What shall you say? What will I do for you? And they answered the king, The man that consumed us, and that devised against us, that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the coast of Israel. Let 7 men of his sons be delivered unto us, and we will hang them up unto the Lord, and Gibeah of Saul, whom the Lord did choose. And the king said, I will give them. But the king spared Mephibosheth, I can't get that out, but it's Jonathan's son, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the Lord's oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. But the king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bare unto Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Michal, the daughter of Saul, whom she brought up for Adriel, the son of Barzillai the Maholathite. And he delivered them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them in the hill before the Lord. And they fell all 7 together, and were put to death in the days of harvest, in the days of the beginning of barley harvest. And Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth, and spread it for her upon the rock from the beginning of harvest until the water dropped them out of heaven, and suffered neither the birds of the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. Now forgive my mangling of those names. They're very hard, and I'm not really good at being able to figure out how to say them anyway, but I think Old Testament names are hard for a lot of people. But when I was reading this, and actually I had heard a sermon on this a few years ago, what was just heartbreaking is Rizpah. To the best of my knowledge, these 7 men were not personally guilty of anything, but their lives had to be given, and there's this mother. She's a mother of 2 of them, I think maybe an aunt to the other ones, and she's protecting their bodies until the harvest came, until the famine was basically over, from being ripped apart by the birds and the beasts of the field. And that's just heartbreaking. That was just one little, she couldn't save their lives, but that was just one little thing that she could do for them. But anyway, we'll get to that in a little bit, about why they were put to death. But the first thing I wanted to say is, I noted in this, is that David waited 3 years. There was famine on the land for 3 years before David inquired of God what was going on. And I just think that, whenever something strikes, we need to seek him first. He might have thought, well, times like this happen and things like that. Well, maybe they do, but we can get out of them quicker. We can deal with them better when we seek God first. But then when he finally did ask God, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why this was, God told him that Saul had attacked the Gibeonites, which was a people that Israel had sworn not to hurt many years prior to this. And that was why this was happening, because God expects us to keep our word. We've all known people who have told us, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that, and it never comes to pass. Now, I realize that sometimes there have been times I've not kept my word, not intentionally, but sometimes I realize things happen you can't help. But when that happens, and you need to talk to the person and make them explain, well, you don't just not deal with it. But anyway, God expects us to keep our promises, and we all know. I'm sorry, my alarm's going off to remind me I have an appointment in a little bit. But we all know people that have just repeatedly, not kept the word. And we might still care for those people, but we don't listen to anything they say anymore. I mean, your word is serious. So in order to make things, the other thing that I noticed here is that David had to make things right. I mean, it wasn't him that didn't keep his word; it was Saul. But he had to steal because he was the king, and he had to make things right. So he went to the Gibeonites, and they required the death of 7 of Saul's descendants. And that seems so hard because, like I said, I might be wrong. There might be other information about this further on or in a different part of the Bible that I haven't read. But from the best of my understanding, these 7 men were not particularly guilty of anything other than being a descendant of Saul, And but this is what the Gibeonites required to make things right. They had you have to make things right, and that's another thing. When you do something to somebody, you wrong somebody, whether it was intentional or not, there are times you can't make things right. I mean, they'll just have to forgive you, but you need to go to that person and talk to them and offer your ask them for forgiveness. I mean, you need to try to have peace and to with people, and to also, as I said before, keep your word. But anyway, I hear a lot of people say, well, my kids aren't going to answer for me. I'm not going to answer for my parents, in a way that they use that as an excuse to live the way they want to live. And in Deuteronomy 24:16, it does, and I thought I had already looked that up and had it marked, but I don't, so I'm going to see if I can find it real quick, and if I can't, we'll move on. Okay. The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. I'm not going to stand before God and have to answer for my parents, and my children are not going to stand before God and have to answer for me. But just because I'm free of the guilt of my father's sin doesn't mean I'm free of the consequences of it. So, these 7 men weren't going to stand before God and answer for what Saul had done, but they faced an early death because of the consequences of what Saul had done. So you think about that, parents, if you live a life of drugs and promiscuity and crime and neglect and all those things, your children will not answer for that sin, but they will be affected by that. They will feel unloved. They risk becoming addicts themselves. They're being unprotected and uncared for in a world full of predators. So no, they're not going to answer for your sin, but they will suffer the consequences of it. And even if you are a loving, decent parent who is taking care of your children and doing all these things that you're supposed to do, good for you. That's great. But if you haven't taught your children Jesus and you haven't lived Jesus in front of them, you have still failed. Because even though they won't answer, if you have not accepted Jesus, or if you have not taught them or lived Jesus the way you should have in front of them, they won't stand before God for that sin. But statistics show that it is much easier for someone to accept Christ if they've been brought up to and taught about Christ. So you've still failed. So think about that. Don't let the fact that you don't have to, that you only will stand before God for your own sin, make you think that you're excused from doing what to do what you want. Because yes, you will only answer for what you've done, but there are still the consequences of what you've done will affect the people that you love the most. And one last thing I want to leave you with is our leaders count. The whole country suffered for Saul's decisions. Because of the famine. So our leaders count. When we put evil leaders in office, we will suffer. And I know, and people say, well, I'm just not even going to vote for nobody because none of them are, what they're supposed to be. Well, you know what? Nobody is what they're supposed to be. This is my litmus test. This is what I vote for. I vote for the most pro-life candidate. And the reason I do that is because, and it says, and I think I did get this. Hold on, I do have this verse marked. If I can, I went ahead and pulled it up on my phone. And of course now, I pulled it up on my phone instead of marking it in my Bible because I just thought it would be easier to get to quicker that way when I got time to read it. But obviously I was wrong. Isaiah 5:20. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. We're probably not going to have a candidate for any public office in this time, or that's going to completely go by God's word. We might in some local levels, but probably in the national level, we're going to have very few opportunities for those. So, to me, there's nothing more evil than the murder of a preborn baby and justifying it. You know, and now the laws are getting more and more where it's almost to the point, where the late term abortions, it's just getting more evil. That is, I vote for the least evil. Um, and I know this, again, it's not a political post, but I'm just saying, look at what Saul did. Even, his country, even after his death, the country that he led suffered for his sins. When you go to put someone in office, no matter at what level, and you vote for someone who is okay with the murdering of unborn children and justifying it by saying that a mother has that right or it might affect the mother's health, what you're doing is Isaiah 5:20. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. So, I ask that you consider that and consider that that decision affects the whole country of who goes in there, goes in office, or the whole city or the whole town, depending on what election you're voting in. So don't vote for someone who will call evil good and good evil. Don't vote for someone that will mangle the word of God to justify certain lifestyles, because you can see from what we read today that just as our decisions affect the others that we love, we are affected by the leaders we put in office. So anyway, just some food for thought, and you guys have a good day.